morning, everyone. This is Looper Talk. My name is Tim Palmer. I have my son with me. Yep. We got a good episode today. Good meaty one. Hopefully you take that however you want. To start every episode, I want to give... You want to come sit? No? I'm going to give a tip. You want to say hey? Anyways, we're going to give a caddy tip every episode, beginning of it, right? You ready? You want to give him one? All right. Let's think. I know one. The obvious one. Keep the bags light. Eight balls, one jacket, one bottle of water. And if the bottle is metal, please carry it with you. Right? 8 balls, one jacket. Yes, and we like stand bags. Hey, what are you eating? Come here. Hey, come here. Come here. 8 balls, one jacket, one bottle of water. All right, so now on to the episode. What do you have in your mouth? Come here. Sorry, this mic's getting loosey. There we go. Thax, come here. All right, well, anyways, episode today is going to be about the PGA of America. About the PGA of America, what it is, won't do much on that. And then we'll get into the what's wrong with it, what needs to be fixed, some advice for some PGA professionals. So, like I said at the first episode, I am a PGA professional. Therefore, you are getting advice from somebody who is a part of the organization. Secondly, no, the organization is not terrible. I'm not trying to completely talk crap about it. I simply want to speak on what needs to be improved. Anyways, it was founded by a bunch of white dudes back in 1916. They wanted to create an organization. If you want to get more into that, let me know. Maybe the more interesting fact for everybody is the PGA Tour was part of the PGA of America. However, they split apart 1968, and then the PGA Tour became officially the PGA Tour on, I think it was 1974, maybe 1975. It used to be called the Tournament Players Division. So, anyways, those are, to me, boring facts. Again, if you want to talk more about it, comment below, and I'll answer any questions regarding that stuff. But let's talk about the organization itself. So there's like 25,000 members, total of 8,800 associates. An associate is a member that hasn't completed their coursework to become a member. Within this organization, there is 2 ways of becoming a member. One of the ways is through the Associates program. The other way is through a PGM university. And I want to speak upon financial regards in those 2 elements, as well as what the current pay is for these professionals and why it is a very hard salary to live on. To start off, within the PGA, there's 41 sections, and within those sections, you have a total of 275 chapters. For example, I am part of the Pacific Northwest section, and I am a part of the Oregon chapter. We have 4 chapters. I believe that is about average for each section. So, let's talk about schooling first. How to become a PGA member, and why is this important for this podcast and for me. So I went through a PGM university, that university, North Carolina State. There's about 16 universities that have the PGM, also known as the Professional Golf Management Program. Well, hi. I had a kitty. What's up, kitty? You got food? Got a lot of pets in my house and kids. It's a lot of heartbeats. So, Yeah, and then outside of the PGM program, you have the associates program, right? So the associates program, you only have to take the tests and go to the seminars. Most of the time, you're working at a golf course already. Um, Therefore, I'm not super positive on the internships. The PGM universities, you are required 16 months of internships. In the associates program, the total cost of the tests and the seminars is right at $4,000 and some change. Travel and all that's going to cost you between 5 to 10 grand. Now, a PGM university is a little different. You are part of a university that helps you receive a 4-year program on top of your PGA accreditation, and therefore you are paying obviously more for that degree. Each semester, or each year, is between 15 to 30,000. Again, that depends on the university you are attending. The total amount of years is around 5 years. So your yearly estimate in regards to that program is 75 to 150,000. Now, remember these numbers because I want to speak upon salary and why that's important. In these programs, you obviously want your Class A membership, and once you get that Class A membership, you're hoping to get a better paying job. That's the whole reason why we go to school. No shit. So, for me, if I'm spending this kind of money, I would like to know that the job I'm getting into will not force me into debt for a very long time. Most of my information I'm finding is in ChatGPT, and so I also look at the sources that ChatGPT gives to me. So some of these sources that I have, I will mention them, but also know that most of these facts I am finalizing, double checking, is through ChatGPT. All right, so the average. Now, before I talk about salary again, let's think about when you get done with these programs, whether it's a PGM program or a associate's program, what job position are you going to acquire more than likely? My guess would be around 80 to 90% of those students, either program, will end up in an assistant pro position. The reason for that is because the assistant pro position, you can pivot very well from that position. It's an easy position to learn multiple skills within the golf industry. Therefore, it's much easier to start out as an assistant professional and grow what you are trying to end up becoming later on down the road. However, other positions would be teaching professionals, some golf management store company, executive type positions, or like club building, club fitting. So there is other avenues besides the golf assistant professional. However, that's your more than likely job position that the student will acquire. So according to salary.com, average assistant professional in the with his Class A membership, by the way, amongst the United States is around $52,000. Now, I also looked at what the average annual cost of living is, and this source is by the Motley Fool, and it's $77,000 and some change. When you are when you earn your PGA Class A membership, and you are getting a job at a golf course as an assistant pro, you are more than likely going to have a job to where you are not going to be able to afford a home. Understand that, that's fine. But the average salary for a head professional is $65,000. So even as a head professional, you are still not even near the annual cost of living to buy a home. Most of the time, it's going to take an individual about 5 to 10 years, roughly, to earn the resume to have a position in order to earn that head pro position. The associate's program to me would make the most sense right now, only being about $7,000 to $8,000 in debt. I believe I have another stat here. The median minimum wage is $11.50. And if we did the math, so I did this equation where I took the 51,000 and some change, and I assumed that the pro was working 48 weeks in the year, right? So if you do the math well, let's first say this. Sorry to backtrack. The average assistant pro works between 40 to 60 hours a week. So I made it at 50 hours per week. And then at that 48 week, or that 48 weeks a year at 50 hours a week, it's right at 2,400 hours, right? And so if you divide that 51,000 divided by the 2,400, you get around $21 and some change. So the assistant pro leaving class, or excuse me, the student graduating from the PGM University or the associate's program, if they end up at an assistant professional job, their average pay is around $21 an hour. And if the median income is $11.50, you're looking at $10 extra an hour. So what I did is I'm thinking, okay, let's say this individual will take home $11.50 an hour. Use that extra $10, basic math here, to see if they can pay off this student debt. And at $10 extra an hour, right? And you're looking at 10,000, like 5 to 10,000 for the associate's program. Man, I should. What are you doing? Don't mess with that. Okay, we're going to recount some numbers, okay? Because I felt like it was just getting too numbery and it was really confusing. So we're just going to lay out some basic math and explain why I'm explaining what's going on here. So, PGA associates between 5 to 10,000 in debt when you are done with the program. PGM universities students 75 to 150,000 in debt. The average salary for an assistant pro is $52,000. Okay, and then the median income, the median minimum wage is $11.50, and then your annual cost of living on average is $78,000. All right, so I'm going to put a scenario to you for each situation. That way, it'll make a lot more sense. First, we're going to start with the associate situation. I'm done with my associate's program. I am now a Class A member. I am $7,500 in debt. I have a job paying me $52,000 a year, right? Now, off gate, again, I'm not going to be able to afford a home because of the average annual cost of living. So I'm going to have to rent. And if I'm living off of minimum wage to pay off my debt, I'm going to have to live in the bare minimum housing. So let's remember that. Like we talked about, if we did the math at 48 weeks, you're looking at $10 extra an hour. Let's just call it that. So to pay off that extra $7,500 at $10 an hour, right? You're going to look at 750 hours extra of work. Okay. So let's say you put in an extra 10 hours. Okay. At 48 weeks, you're looking at a year and a half in debt, right? And so more realistically, we'll call it 2 years just to be safe. And that sounds about right. Associates are probably 2 to 3 years in debt. They can get their way out of it. That's, so 3 years in debt, fine. You're having to live like shit. for a while. Sorry, Thax. But you get it. Now, let's do the PGM University. That, to me, is baffling. Can I just advise you, parents that have a kid in the PGM program, get them the fuck out. Get them out. We're talking about $10,000 in debt, and these mugs are like 2.5, 3 years in the hole, which is, again, that's reasonable, right? That makes sense. You're still not getting paid a salary that's you can afford a home, but, hey, let's not talk about that. But you have, shit, man, you got bare minimum 75. That's 7.5 times what the 10 grand is. And maybe the argument, and this is a valid argument, when you come from a PGM university, you have better connections. Well, excuse me. You have better opportunities for connections, meeting people in the business that have been more successful. You have access to seminar teachings from, again, more, what word could I say, experienced professionals that have been involved with, say, the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour, like teaching professionals and such. So it's it just doesn't make sense. In the math I did for the PGM University, you're looking at 7.5 to 10 years in debt. And that's with you doing everything that I mentioned for the associates program. We don't have to get into all that. That's should be obvious at this point. So, okay, what can we take from all this? To me, if I was to get into the PGA, which I believe is still an organization you should be a part of, that accreditation is very helpful in growing your platform. It's also very helpful in getting you access to better jobs. It will help your resume get put to the top of the pile. So the organization itself, I believe, is a very productive organization. There is some shadiness to it. I believe that seems to me like greed, because if our PGM students are going to go through that much effort and their parents are going to spend that much money, why are we setting our students up for failure? That is something super interesting for me, that we can't somehow create a labor union to where we can provide a better means of income. I gotta pause it. All right, everyone, I'm back. Sorry, I had to run some errands. Kid stuff. Being a dad. Well, we were talking. That wasn't a was it? No, we're good. All right. So we were talking about salaries. We have figured out that the pay for these professionals working in clubhouses, at golf courses, assistant and head professionals, their salary is not adequate enough or equivalent to the annual cost of living. Therefore, if you take these positions, you are subject to having a lifestyle where you cannot afford certain things necessary to prosper in our country, which means, in my mind, something needs to change. So let's figure out how to make that change. I'm a big solution guy. I enjoy finding the problems, but I also believe we need to enjoy the solutions much more. So, as corny as that shit is, where do we start? Well, the obvious answer for those professionals, this, I hate to say this, I know. Sorry to piss you all off. This is a very basic answer, but maybe somebody will need to hear this. Assistant and head professionals can teach on the side. There's a lot of people that see their accreditation as not only golf knowledge within the business side, they see their knowledge as helping them play golf. That's why we all joined to begin with. I think a lot of those professionals really enjoy making an impact on these golfers in their journey in the game. So what they can do, instead of having the golf club take a percentage off, you should start trying to negotiate a plan to where it'll be strictly cash only that goes directly to you. That way you can deposit as much as you need to pay tax, to show proof of income or whatever you need to do, and you can keep some cash on you to help out with bills and everything that is necessary. So that's an obvious answer. However, I believe there's a bigger answer for this, and I believe we can see what we can do to add longevity to this plan. So I asked the right questions to ChatGPT, and eventually it printed out a plan, a 5-piece plan. I will attach it to the video, and it shows you every little thing you can do. And what I'm going to do is try to explain that plan, and I'll explain what everything is in terms of where the money can go, how we can negotiate around the nonprofit, right? So the PGA of America is a nonprofit organization. It is a 501c6. Therefore, any income that is, or any revenue, total revenue that is documented within this organization, it has to go back to the organization, whether it's salaries, education, staging events, etc. So when you look at their profit margins, or you look at their fiscal financial accounting report, this year it shows a net loss. What I have read, I'll show you. All right, so this is your source, ProReplica. ProPublica. Apology. Revenue here, right? So you got 172 million. Expenses are 185 million. So their loss this year was 13 million. From what I've read, nonprofits can show a loss based upon it being a nonprofit, since everything that is documented has to go back to the organization. Their assets and contracts are involved in them. So sometimes by the end of the year, or when their fiscal year ends, some contracts could have postponed, or some assets maybe have depreciated temporarily. So they show a total everything there. So that's why I feel like for nonprofits, most people don't get so upset about showing loss, as long as there's years where they show a surplus of profit, which they do. If we go down to 2022 here, you'll see a 72 million. Yeah, see, look right there, right? That alone is giving people the confidence of, we can take a few years of barely breaking even or losing. If we have good years enough to surplus everything else around it. So this is your salary board for the year of 2023, I believe. Nope, 2024, excuse me. Got your CEO here, 3.8. All your executive directors here, all averaging over $1 million. A bunch of anything that is coming from corporate America, yeah, corporate PGA, they're averaging over $500,000 for their salary. And then from there on down, you can, here we go. Where's the president? There you go. Boom. Right. And that's salary they make on top of what they make at their club. Because it's a nonprofit, they have to volunteer their time. So that figure gets put under the related column. So I'm almost positive that salary, they have to use it for their travel and expenses within the PGA. So that's enough to bore you all to death. But what I'm trying to say is there's enough money floating around in corporate to create a plan that will really, let me show y'all there's enough money there at corporate PGA to create a pool that we can pay the professionals a wage, right? So here's the screen. Okay, so this is the plan. This is the plan, the 3-year plan. It's an acceleration plan that I convinced ChatGPT to make. Pretty cool stuff, but it was really interesting to read because it claims it can raise the salary 30 to 40% within 3 years. And I'm going to leave it. I'm going to try to attach it to the video. If not, I will have it on hand. You all can send me your email, and I'll just send it to you. Because if we get this in the right hands, maybe it'll impact somebody to make a change. And, this is important to me because it's going to create better morale within the professional staff, right? So we'll get into that here in a second. So there's something here that's interesting. It's called revenue sharing pool, right, where they take 2 to 3% from the PGA and the Ryder Cup revenues. They're estimating that the PGA Championship, and this is, so let's talk about this stuff. Okay, so we get the paint, we get the gist. Yay, yada. I came up with a plan. I'm proud of myself. I don't want to be up here just bitching, being like, the PGA sucks, oh my God. What they did to me was terrible. They created me. I don't have a lot of trust for PGA professionals. God bless y'all. There's a few I do trust. There's some good people I've met in this section. I'm not going to diss everybody, but man, I don't have, there's some knows there. Dang it. I can feel it. Anyways, I don't feel like, I just don't really feel like there's a lot of integrity and character attached to the association, and I believe that comes with every professional having to scrap to make enough money just to be able to feel confident enough to know that they're progressing in life. It's a very tough job at times, and it requires a lot of responsibility for the little amount of pay. And I think the PGA of America making that deal with CBS is very interesting to me because it's the same company broadcasting that the PGA Tour made. And the PGA Tour, it was public at $7 billion. And the PGA of America deal, it's not public. And the CBS is owned by a guy of the name Larry Ellison, who is, he's an oligarch, Jewish oligarch, has a lot of money, pro-Israel guy, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that's a different conversation. What I am interested in is he's, the second richest man in the world? So I'm wondering if he's not supplementing a lot of these losses for the organization, especially with the PGA Tour. It would be very interesting to get behind the scenes on that since the PGA Tour has lost viewership over the years. That's another episode. I can't wait to do that one. However, getting back to the PGA of America, their relationship with CBS during that it's an 11-year deal. They kept the numbers private, so you cannot see what the actual amount of the contract was worth. But they broadcast the PGA Championship every year. So I think there was one more kind of solution that's not really that cool. It would work. They were talking about doing an app for the PGA Championship every year, like the Masters has, and create some sort of pay scale that way. I think that would be kind of cool. That would be interesting to see if people would actually invest in that. You would get more viewers, I think, because it would be accessible by hand, and the amount that we stare at our phone these days, that might create something there. So, but what I can do is I will attach that document to the video, and you all can check it out. Any professionals, Class A professionals, want to correct me, talk, have a conversation, anything, I'm open ears. Again, I'm here to bring awareness. That's the best I can. I am definitely not perfect. I strive to learn as much as I can. And I believe that there's so much to learn out there from everybody, including my fellow professionals within this organization. So it would be awesome to interact with everyone. Sorry, yes, I did say I can't trust most of them, and that's mostly within my section from how I've been treated due to my recent situation. So that'll take time for me. I don't mean to sit on the pity party. That's just how I feel. It is what it is. Sure, down the road it'll soften up and whatever. I'll get off my sad little. There it went, dude. I said again. Motherfucker. So yeah. I think down the road, the PGA of America can create a morale structure, to have a financial structure that will create more morale within the organization, which will then lead to people wanting to be a part of that organization, right? So I'm super excited, pretty much. I'm going to have to put like $6 in the jar by the end of this. It's like late, and ugh. But I think when it comes down to it, this podcast will hopefully bring a little light to your life and create some conversation within the golf industry that we need to have, and to maybe see if this conversation can lead to some productive outcomes to get everyone in a better state of mind and to create a better future for everyone. So, well, that's it. All for Looper Talk. Thanks for visiting. Thanks for tuning in, listening to me bullshit for a little bit. So, well, and always as a reminder, lighten the bags, 200 a strap. I like that. It's going to be my saying when I'm out. Lighten the bags, 200 a strap, boy. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you. See you next time.